Hi and welcome. This is the first watercolor tutorial that I'm adding to my website. As you know, my name is Carol-Anne Almquist, and this is an entry-level tonal landscape tutorial. Tonal being as it's in black and white, and this image here in the mat is what the finished product will look like. So what I'm showing you here are the supplies that you're going to need. First of all, I'm going to pull out a size 12 round brush, a flat brush, a 2B pencil, an eraser, and what I've got to show you next is my little watercolor sketchbook and a spray bottle with water. So the watercolor sketchbook, I'll open it up here and you'll see I have lots of little sketches. I try to work in it regularly, and the things are very rough, nothing that anybody really would want to see. They're just ideas that I'm putting down, thoughts, and even some journaling as I go along. So I recommend keeping one of these little sketchbooks and using it regularly to increase your skills. This it's basically a piece of foam, is what I use to put my watercolor paper on. My watercolor paper is 140 pound cold pressed. Okay, so here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is show you the project at hand, which is going to be, this is a photo reference of a tonal landscape painting with 1, 2, 3, 4 different levels of values. The sky, the distant mountains, the medium distance mountains, and the foreground. Going from dark, medium, light, lightest. So that is the photo, and this here is the little watercolor that I did of that image there. And it's a very basic beginner level watercolor. We're not using color, we're using what's called neutral tint, which is kind of a grayish black color, because using black and white is the simplest way to start. And what I'll do is I'll show you first of all, dark, medium, light values in the white of the paper, which we use in watercolor instead of a white color. And I will show you also what's called a graded wash, which is the background sky would start dark and then you would ease it into a lighter value, and then dry it. Then you would do the first background level of the lightest value mountains, and then we wash it down, adding clear water, dry it, then do the mid-level mountain range, bring the wash all the way down, dry it, and then do the foreground mountains, bring it all the way down and dry it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of values. The first thing I'll do is show you, I use clear water, and I like a pointed brush, just used to it. So I take my color and I add lots of water to it because we're going to use lots of the value. And I have my palette here, which I'm just going to re-wet from having used it earlier. And use lots of color in there. And then I'm going to start another well, and I'm going to do that level and maybe a medium value, which I will be washing out. So we're going to start out, we're going to do the darkest value, which is the first one that I made up, full of color, about the consistency of thick cream. And even that's not all that dark, so I can add some more to the palette. And then I'm going to do my dark, dark wash. And one thing about watercolor, you should mix up enough of your color that you don't have to mix up more and run out, because with watercolor you have to work fairly quickly. So that's my dark value, and then I'm going to do a mid-tone value. So that would be about a medium value. And all I do is add a little bit more water. And before I'm working on a painting, I would probably do this on a test strip to make sure I've got the right value. And then for my third value, it's quite light. Oh, that's not even light enough. I would add more water. And I feel that that's not even really light enough there, because there's not much variation. So maybe I could, this was still wet, so I could probably add to it. As long as it's still wet, I can work with it. But once it starts to dry, you gotta leave it alone. And then my last would be mostly just the white of the paper with a little bit of my color added to it. And you'll find when you're working with watercolors, you can barely see that on the camera. It'll also dry quite a bit lighter than it goes on while it's wet. So that's dark, medium, lighter, and white, light, or you can leave the white of the paper. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to do what we call a graded wash. And to do that, I'm going to use a flat brush because it's easier. I have here a flat brush. So I'm going to use a fairly dark value, add a little water, maybe even add a little more paint to that. And I'm going to start at the top. Actually, what I'll do first is a flat wash. I'll do the flat wash first. So we're going to do a flat wash. And I always have paper towel nearby. So I'm just going to, I can still work on it because it's still wet. And it takes a bit of practice to get, and I'm raising it to let the water blend. So as I raise it, the water runs down and it blends. And then I'm not going to have all the lines because I worked on it while it was wet. It didn't have a chance to dry. It's not leaving lines where I was working. So that would be a flat wash. Then I'm going to do a graded wash. Again, I'm using lots of color. So I start on my, for this you have to be quite precise. So I'm going to start doing one straight line all the way across. And then I'm going to rinse out my brush and I'm going to go along the edge and add water, and it's going to bleed into a lighter value. And again, I'm going to rinse off my brush and add clear water, and it gets lighter. And then lighter and lighter and lighter. And then if I want it to be even, I would hold it up and let the water run down. And that is a graded wash. And as the color moves down, you get more of a gradual change in value. So these are all techniques you're going to use for the landscape painting. So this would be your sky going down to the horizon. Then you would probably, with this image, I would then use the lightest value for the back mountains. Then I would use the medium value for the mid-ground mountain range and the dark value for the front ones. Here I've got two different ranges and slightly different values, but on my painting that I did, I simplified it and I made this just into one dark value. Okay. Now I'm going to begin the first part of the demo. I'm going to lay down the sky graded wash. So I put on a strip of the lightest value that I have, as we did in the demo, and I add clear water, dragging down the wash right down to where the bottom of my painting is going to be. And you have to work quickly while keep adding the water while it's still wet. And here I'm going to go and put it over the hairdryer, dry it off fully, bring it back, and start on my first range of distant mountains, and that will be the light value, not the lightest, the second lightest value, and I'm going to follow my image and do the shape of the mountains as I see in the photograph. So here we're adding a little paint in the shape of the mountains. And as much as it seems as I'm going fairly slowly here, I'm working quickly enough that the paint doesn't dry so that I can keep working in the paint. And I've got a fair amount of water in that paint, because if it starts to dry, you can't keep working on it. It'll make a mess. Now dragging all the color right down to the bottom of the painting. And it will make an effect as if there's clouds against the mountain. So I'll take it and dry it off completely, bring it back. Now it's completely dry. Add a darker value, and I'm testing it at the top of my paper. And I'm going to do the second level mountain range with a slightly darker value, a mid-range value, following the forms that I see on my photograph quite closely. Bringing it right down to the bottom, and again working quickly before the paint dries on the paper so that it doesn't make marks that I don't want there. Bringing it with clear water all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm going to take it and dry it with a hairdryer, dry it completely, and work on my next mountain range. And this will be the darkest value that I have, so I'm using lots of paint. And following the image on my photograph, this is the foreground mountain, so it's quite dark, quite thick paint, like thick heavy cream. Whereas the background mountains, you would describe the thickness of the paint more as like using Kool-Aid. The thickness of Kool-Aid, and this is more like a heavy cream. And this will be right to the bottom of my painting, using lots of color. And still enough water that it doesn't dry too quickly. So it's called watercolor for a reason. You do use a fair amount of water in the application of the paint. So here I'm going to try putting a mat on the painting, and as you can see it doesn't quite fill the mat. So I'm going to take the mat off and refinish the bottom part of the painting, and to do that I'm using lots of thick paint. I'm going to have to go right over the area that I painted, at least as thick as what I've already put on there, if not darker. And then I'm adding a little bit of mountain further down the page so that I can put the mat on it. Again, adding thicker paint than what I've already put there and going all the way over what I already painted, covering all of what I painted. And you can do that once it's dry. You can't do that if it was still wet, but you can now that it's dry. You can go right over it. And right to the edge. And then I'm going to put it under the hairdryer and dry it off. And then I put the mat on, it fits nicely. And there we have a finished painting. So nice little painting, tonal landscape painting. And that's it. I really like it if you'd email me to let me know your comments on the video, and if you're interested in seeing more of these videos, and if you do, what kind of content you'd like to see. And also, I'm just learning how to do these videos, to make them and to edit them and everything, so constructive criticism is most welcome. I'll be sending out some emails to subscribers to my newsletters to let you know when I upload more of them. So thank you for watching.